Hi everyone. Okay, the first game of the Anand Carlsen World Championship match has taken place. The opening ceremony yesterday was fantastic, and India are putting on a hell of a show. The venue was literally overflowing with supporters and well-wishers as the first game got underway. Magnus had white and opened with knight f3, the Reti opening, a hyper-modern choice that keeps black guessing regarding how white is going to play with his central pawns. Vishy answered with d5, which is the classical response. So next came g3 from Magnus, clearly indicating to fianchetto and solidify his king. Vishy answered in suit with g6, and then both players fianchettoed, bishop g2, bishop g7, and at this move bishop g7 controls e5 equally with knight, so white can play, black can play e5 next if white allows it, and Carlsen of course didn't want to, so he played d4. The question of preparation is always a massive factor in World Championship matches, and it was interesting to see today what Carlsen chose. It's a standard and solid setup, and it makes sense given his style of play, because generally speaking it leads to long, slow maneuvering positional kind of games, exactly the area in which he excels. It's important to know how well prepared Vishy was. It's impossible to know how well prepared Vishy was for these lines, although some insights were gained from the press conference, which we'll get to later. For now, Vishy played c6, cementing the pawn on d5 and ensuring that this bishop on g2 is going to be as inactive as possible against black's queenside. So Magnus now castled, and after knight f6, just a standard developing move, he played b3, aiming to fianchetto his other bishop as well. As I said, such positions tend to lead to kind of long, slow games, and the double fianchetto system has both strengths and weaknesses. I was chatting with Fight Master Malik during play, and he's of the opinion that it's fine to play the system up to a certain level, but once you get to around 2650 elo mark, it becomes a little bit dangerous. Another option here for white is c4, but perhaps black can simply take here, d takes c4, and this is one of the benefits of having played c6. One of the ideas behind it may well have been to disencourage this c4 push, because obviously now there's no queen a4 check to win back the c4 pawn, and white's going to have to take time to win the pawn back, and perhaps his strong pawn center is going to give enough compensation after e4, but facing the 4-2 pawn majority is something that all Queen's Gambit players occasionally have nightmares about, and it's understandable that Magnus didn't want to take such a risk in a World Championship match. So b3 was his move. So Vishy castled now, and after bishop b2 he played bishop f5, and with white's bishops committed to the long diagonals, black can choose in turn which diagonals he wants for his bishops. Okay, he's already fianchettoed to one on g7, but the light square bishop has a choice of diagonals. He knows it's going to be unopposed if he doesn't go on the long diagonal, which obviously he isn't going to do, having played c6 and d5. He also doesn't have to worry about any kind of bishop b5 or g5 ideas to attack his knights, and this kind of clarifies the strategical situation a little bit. So having prepared c4 with his move b3, Carlsen now played c4, and he's got b takes c4 in the event of d takes c4 now. So Vishy continued with knight b d7, and here Magnus played the less common knight c3 move here. Statistically, knight b d2 is more popular. So Vishy is now able to make the position a little more open with some forcing ideas. First by playing d takes c4, and after b takes c4 playing knight b6, and this is actually a key move in the game today. As I said, it's forceful, and it makes white have to make some decisions, because the knight here is attacking c4, and the c4 square is the classic Achilles' heel when white fianchettos his kingside bishop. c4 square becomes weak. And this is further emphasized because white has played b3 and b takes c4, and this means that c4 square is now a permanent hole in the white position. And in actual fact, most of the computers and analysts of the game now give black a slight edge in the position. Of course, if white can play e4 and storm down the center with pawns, he's doing well, which presumably was what Magnus was playing for here. But for the moment, black has the initiative with this attack on c4. So Magnus played the committal move here, c5, which weakens the d5 square at least temporarily. But rather than playing knight d5, Vishy of course played knight c4 to get to this good square. And on top of being a hole in the white position, one of the advantages of playing the knight here is that it attacks the loose bishop on b2. So Carlsen didn't want to give up the bishop, so he undeveloped it with the bishop c1. Also possible was queen b3, where black can gain the bishop pair with knight takes b2 if he likes, but also good is bishop e6, so threatening knight e3, attacking the rook and the queen, so winning the exchange. And queen takes b7 obviously isn't working, or rook b8 and it's going to lose a piece. So best is queen c2. This is made possible by bishop e6, and now black can try b6, and I think it's fair to say he's equalized, if not better. So it's easy to understand why Magnus played bishop c1 instead here. So bishop c1 was the move, and knight d5 is how Vishy chose to continue, and this is strong and it makes positional sense. Also possible was queen a5, attacking the loose knight on c3, where we see a similar variation to that which we just saw. Queen b3, bishop e6, queen c2, and now black can try rook a d8, and he must be at least equal here. Okay, white has e4, but now comes b6, and black is starting to break down white. Of course, it's a little risky for black to bring the queen out, and it makes sense that Vishy wanted to choose a safer line that led to a certain positional edge. Another possible move, looked at the commentators, instead of this queen a5 or knight d5, was e5 here, where the line that they mentioned went knight takes e5, knight takes e5, d takes e5, queen takes d1, rook takes d1, knight d7, and black, he does get back the pawn, but the engines are giving a nice advantage to white after f4. And knight takes c5 is actually pretty risky after bishop a3, pinning the knight, and in fact white's close to winning after b6, bishop takes c6, rook a b8, and knight b5. I think the commentators are watching without computer analysis, so the lines they're looking at are not maybe 100% optimal. So knight d5 anyway, and queen b3 was the next move from Carlsen, both defending his knight on c3 and attacking the loose knight on c4. In the press conference afterwards, he seemed to indicate that he'd intended to play queen e1 here, perhaps following up with e4, but then he saw that knight b4 threatening knight c2 is very strong for black. It's incisive play, swooping in to white's weakened queen side, and notably the light squares c4 and c2. And in the press conference, Magnus conceded that at this point it was clear that he'd gone a little astray, and that it was time to put on the emergency brakes. Of course, white doesn't want to play knight d5 here, in this position, after knight d5 has been played by white instead of queen e1, which we just saw. or queen b3, knight d5, because after c takes d5, the c4 knight is cemented on this excellent outpost square, and it becomes hard for white to play e4. You can't play knight d2 to defend that, or sorry, to attack the knight, or just bishop takes d4, attacking the rook, and in fact winning the rook. It doesn't have a square to go to. So that's no good. So obviously that would be good for black. So queen b3 is what Magnus played, and now came knight a5 from Vishy, attacking the queen and also defending b7. As I said, Magnus now felt he had to put the brakes on and cut out black's play at all costs, so we saw queen a3 and now knight c4, and a repetition with queen b3 and knight a5. And Vishy was prepared to take a threefold repetition. A draw with the black pieces is a good result, especially considering he has lost twice with black against Carlsen recently. He could have played here b5, and after c takes b6, knight a5, queen b2, a takes b6, but this gives white some weaknesses to attack, and he doesn't have to take en passant anyway. After b5 he can play a4, and he's got a little bit of initiative going on here. But anyway, we didn't see that line. After knight a5 came queen a3 and knight c4 again, and here the players agreed to a draw. This is the third time we've seen this position. So I have to say it was a somewhat disappointing start from a spectator's point of view. A 16 move 90-minute draw, and even the players said that they hoped they could provide more entertainment for all the people who were watching in the press conference. However, as I said, it's easy to understand Vishy's reasoning here, and in fact this is a psychological victory for him. There's no doubt that Magnus will be at least a little annoyed that this game didn't go better. It was really a waste of one of his games with white pieces, and a little embarrassing that Vishy was able to equalize so quickly and even force white into retreating his bishop and, you know, getting this nice active position very early in the game. So definitely something went wrong for Carlsen here, and it's not clear how much of this was preparation, but certainly not much beyond the opening few moves anyway, as it went wrong for whites fairly soon after that. Despite being a short draw, a lot has taken place. As Vishy said in the press conference, information has been given by either side with regard to how they are approaching the match. He didn't go into specifics. He was even a little shocked when a member of the crowd appeared to be asking him about his strategy for the match, one of the journalists, but it only takes common sense to realize that Magnus clearly wanted a long positional squeeze here, and that may be his approach to the match and the general play of the games. Vishy knows that the opening is the so-called weak point of Magnus, and today it seems like one idea of his is to try and attack quickly and open things up before Magnus is able to establish an edge or any kind of slight control over the position. Magnus also did not want to say much about his match strategy. There was a pregnant pause when he was quizzed, sorry. And so it's clear that both players are both up to something, so to speak, but unclear what exactly that is. Of course, they both will have more than one strategy that they are employing for the match. In any case, although the score remains level at half a point each, the psychological edge is definitely with Anand after this game. He had absolutely no trouble today, and those expecting a walkover from Carlsen were abruptly silenced. Tomorrow Anand has the white pieces, meaning that he also has a little momentum, and one of the big questions will be whether he opens with king's pawn or not. The servers were a little unreliable today. I imagine there are millions of people watching the game worldwide, so hopefully tomorrow the servers will be better and we will see a longer and more interesting game. Okay, so I'll be back tomorrow with more coverage from Game 2 of the World Championship match. Thanks.